AO7 here. Um, this is probably going to be a quick one. I just wanted to just kind of touch on something that it frustrates me that the game doesn't show new players, and unless you really spend time here and you watch YouTube videos and you go down the Angry Turtle rabbit hole, for the casual player that picks up this game, plays the story because they watched the TV show or because they played Fallout 4, and doesn't really give two shits about events and online and that sort of thing, the game doesn't tell them anything. So they find themselves at the end of the main story struggling with what should be really easy. And I thought I would just take a second and just kind of go over something that the game doesn't explain that makes a mountain of difference if you're just casually playing the game. Um, let's just start out like if you want to make a weapon, right? And let's say you're going to make a hunting rifle. So the first thing you want to make sure that you always do, whether you make it yourself or use one that you found in the world, it's very important that you make sure that the level of the weapon is the highest that it can be in relation to you. For example, a level 1 is 134 damage. A level 50 is 445 damage. So just making sure you've got the right level weapon, that alone is huge. Okay? So because I don't have one, I'm just going to make one. And then we'll switch here. I'm just going to scrap this crap because it doesn't need to be in the way. And we're going to say that this is the hunting rifle that you either made or found. And I watch a lot of those casual players, they'll use it like this. I think that, because most games, like a Call of Duty game or something, the gun is the gun. You pick the gun up and you use what the fuck gun is. In this game, everything about the gun is how you customize the gun. So if you look here, and we'll leave that for last, okay? So just start out with receiver, and if you played the game for 100 levels and you've scrapped a bunch of these, you know most everything. So just going down the list here, look at the damage number. Look how the damage number changes with everything. But the range changes, the VATS accuracy changes, the weight of the gun changes. And you take a minute and you look down through this list and you go, okay, well, what's most important to me? Okay, this robot's cutting me in half, so I need to do huge damage. So you go down through here until you find the one where by the damage, the blue number that says plus is the highest that you can get it, right? So then when I look through here, the highest I can get that is 130. Okay, so we're going to put this receiver on here. Okay? Whoops. And now we're going to go, we're going to move down to the barrel. And now you see how the barrels do the same thing. They change the damage, they change the range, and they change the accuracy. Let's say, okay, for you, maybe you need really, really great accuracy. And range is really important. A Lion Long Barrel, look how much range it adds. Look how much VATS accuracy it adds. Compared to, where you're at. Okay? So we add that. And then you look here with the stock. Same thing. See how this one stock takes a little bit of damage away? Maybe you're not a VATS player, okay? So you're like, oh, the VATS shit doesn't mean shit to me. So I don't need that. Okay? So maybe you're like, oh, well, I like the idea of this one because then when I rifle butt people, because you look down at the bottom and you get minus 15 recoil but plus 25 melee damage. So when you rifle butt somebody, it'll be more forceful. Okay, so maybe you want to pick this one. And then you look at the magazines and you see how this magazine, because it adds armor penetration, raises the damage. Actually, these two both do. But then you see how this one is faster reload speed. If maybe that's your fucking issue. This one here is more you know what I mean? Every one of these provides you different benefits against different negatives. So you just go through here and you pick out which one is going to be best for your case. And then you look at the sights and you go, oh, here, look, glow sights gives me plus 10 to VATS accuracy. Well, okay, maybe you don't use VATS. Maybe you want to use a scope. You know, then you look down at the bottom here and it's plus 24% to sighted accuracy. So if you're a look down the sights kind of guy, maybe this is the way that you want to go. So you add this. Man, I gotta stop pushing the wrong keys. And then with the muzzle you look, okay, obviously the clear choice if you want it to be quiet, if you're trying to be sneaky, is a suppressor. But otherwise, you look at all these, they affect the range and the VATS accuracy. You know, so you may be like, oh man, I really, 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 really want more accuracy, but I don't care so much about a little bit of range. So maybe you want to go with the compensator. But you see what I'm saying? You took a gun that at level 1 barely did 200 damage, and now it's 614 damage on the card. You take this gun out in the real world and shoot enemies in the face with it, and it'll do 2,000 damage. That's where I think a lot of players miss a big part of the fun of this game is they pick up a gun, they use the gun the way that they picked it up, and they make their opinion based on how the gun was then. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, and then you go, well, okay, let's do this. And then now let's add 3 legendary stars to this. Okay, 2-shot is absolutely phenomenal. I wouldn't change that if you get that. But maybe you don't like some of these. So then you should have some on hand, right? From playing the game or from stopping at other player vendors or whatever. And then you can say, okay, well, my issue is that I need it to fire faster, so I can make it fire faster. Or I need it to be better in VATS. Or I want to be able to, every time I shoot somebody in the leg, I want to know that they're going to immediately just fall to the ground and take a knee. That's where you have to, this is where you pick up that gap from, you know, seeing a player that jumps 50 feet in the air and one-shots a boss to you getting your face clobbered in. This is what they're doing that you're not doing. It's not magic. This game is really not a skill game. Like, it's not a, like, you know, he's got a more expensive mouse or a better controller than I do, or, you know, or he's got better reflexes than me. That's not what this game's about. This game is all about understanding this. Understanding that you can customize everything to suit you best. You know, and then you look here, okay, I'm just going to say it before I leave here. You look at the AP cost of this weapon is 38. That's particularly high for AP cost, right? But then when you look at your perk cards, I see players take a lot of perk cards that don't have anything to do with doing more damage or taking less damage. In my opinion, from somebody who's got 5,000 plus hours in this game, until you feel like you're Neo in the Matrix and you're just swatting things away in some kind of weird slow motion, the only perks that you should take are perks that make you do more damage or take less damage. I see a lot of builds where 99% of the perks are, you know, get more shit out of containers, you know, run faster when you're in a team. You know, those are the perks that you take later, after your build is already rock solid. You know, in the beginning, the important thing for a new player are perks like this. 20% of damage dealt to a limb is applied to all limbs. Okay? Here's the one that if you have a gun that has high AP cost, this is a game changer. Your weapons have 2% increased damage per AP cost. Okay, so if your weapon does, say, 50 damage or 50 AP, costs 50 AP, that's 100 extra damage. 100% extra damage. You see what I'm saying? So, like, that's huge, you know. But look, you know, you look at every single, you look at every single card in Perception here is a card that has to do with damage to the enemies, except for this one. You know? It's that's the thing that I don't see a lot in people's build. When somebody's struggling, I look at their build and they have cards that I don't know how to describe it, but they're like Stardew Valley cards. They're like cozy game cards for like so that it can be comforting and soothing and you're not struggling for carry weight or ammo or different, you know what I mean? And so they focus the build on that, and then it leaves out all the cards that do damage or prevent you from getting your ass kicked. Then you get your ass kicked. You know, there's a lot of cards that you can take in endurance, you know, like this card alone. Armor provides 25% more protection. Double if you're wearing 5 pieces and they're all combat armor, this is 50%. It's things like that that are just absolutely huge. But I think the biggest thing is understanding that you can take whatever weapon you're using and go to the workbench and improve it. There's very few weapons that you can't really improve. Like the black powder rifle, for example, the only thing you can do is put a bayonet on it, which is okay if you're gonna melee enemies with your rifle, but most weapons have many modifications that you can make to them. And that is huge. So, like, that needs to be covered in the game better, and it's not. You know, I mean, they think that, you know, either you've learned this from Fallout 4 or you just happen to see a bench and you're like, oh, and you come over here because you played some other crafting game somewhere else. You know, but this infuses a lot of elements from like a crafting game that you wouldn't see in a game like Call of Duty. But then, you know, it wants you to be, you know, play combat like it's Call of Duty. But honestly, if you're struggling, start here. Come to the bench, look at your weapon, change the weapon all around to make it suit you better, and then go try it again and see what difference that makes for you. But until the next one, I'm in 7. Watching me.